Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Allison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hi, this is Cindy, and Allison is also on the line. Say hi, Allison.
Hi.
And today we're going to talk about something that really can impact how we raise and work with young children, and that's bias. Bias, I don't know if that term is really well defined. I think that when we think bias, we always think just sort of religion or racial prejudice, but there's so much more to it. Right? There's so much more to it. We're all raised with bias. We have bias because we think that where we come from and our culture and the way we are raised and the way that we live our lives is normal. And there really is no normal.
Well, sometimes I like to think that it's all normal.
Right. Well, yeah. You can look at it that way.
Normal. It's just that it's all normal.
It's all. You're right. Yeah. We could look at it that way. There's no one definitive norm.
Correct.
But that's always our point of view. And it was so interesting. I took a class recently having to do with this notion that, my normal is not your normal. And that doesn't make it any less normal. So I took this class recently and I found it fascinating. So I was telling Allison about it. We decided to share some information on the podcast about it so that everyone who has any role in a young child's life can think about it, because in every interaction we're teaching them,
Right.
And so what I have in front of me, I'm just going to kind of go through this list really quickly from this class I took, a list of different social categories and what in the society in which Allison and I are speaking, which is North America, the year 2018 to 19, in our society right now where we are, what gives you power and agency and what would make you a target of bias? So here are those categories, and then we can talk about them, Allison, and you can, both of us can talk about what we've experienced when working with children or what we've witnessed. So age-wise, Allison, I have good news for you and me. We are considered people with agency or power. If you are an adult,
nice.
Right? If you are an adult between the ages of 18 to 64, you are in a position of power. However, if you are a child, an adolescent, or someone over the age of 64, I have bad news.
Oh.
Yeah, that would make you a possible target for bias. And then there's the category of disability. Able people, of course, are in a position of power, and people with disabilities are not. Religious culture also has agency and target information. So you are in a powerful position if you are a cultural Christian, agnostic, or atheist. Isn't that interesting?
That is fascinating.
Right? And you are not in a position of power if you are Muslim, Jewish, or any other non-Christian religion.
Well, that I figured, yeah. But the agnostic and atheist.
Isn't that interesting?
Being lumped in, well, I knew Christian would be up there, but
right.
That being lumped in
and I knew I would not.
And I knew
I knew I would not.
I knew, I know.
But
but
now everyone can wonder. You all wonder about me now. So agnostics and atheists, I thought that was very interesting that they're considered to be in a position of power.
Wow.
I would have thought that they would be among the minorities, but apparently no.
Right.
Ethnicity, Euro-Americans, where we live, Euro-Americans, people who are American of European descent have power, and people of color do not. Yeah. Social class, it says owning and middle class who have access to higher education are in positions of power, and the poor and working class are not.
Yeah.
Sexual orientation, you can guess this. Heterosexuals are in the position of power.
Yeah.
Gay men, lesbians, and bisexuals are not. And that's what's on this list. I'm not sure. This is a list in a scholarly work. I see that they don't list transgender, but that would go right there under possible target,
Yeah.
I can look at the year of this, what I'm looking at. I mean, it's fairly new, but let's see. Indigenous background, non-native, which means you are not Native American. That gives you power. And if you are Native American, you have less power, if any at all. National origin, if you are where Allison and I are from, if you are born in the United States, you have power. And if you are an immigrant or a refugee, no. And as far as gender, oh, here it is. As far as gender, males have power, females, transgendered, and intersexed do not. So when I was taking this class, we had to sit down with this chart and sort of tick off, where do I fall? And it usually is that in some areas of your life, you have agency and power, and in some areas of your life, you would be a target. You know, for example, I have agency and power as far as I am able-bodied, I'm an adult, I'm Euro-American, I'm U.S. born, but then I also am a target of bias because of my religion, because I am female, you know, there are other things. So it can kind of go like that. And you can lean toward one or the other. But I think the importance of the exercise was to recognize, where am I sort of in a majority that has power and where am I not? And I think it's a good exercise for everyone who works with children, at least, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Because there's the dog.
He was so quiet for a little while.
I know. So there are like, you know, I think we have to recognize, and we have to try and work with young children, raise them and teach them in ways where maybe we can produce less bias in our society. So I can give you an example, and maybe you could think of others. You know, for example, in early childhood classrooms and in our interactions with young children, I would like them to know that females can also be in positions of power, and that doesn't make them nasty. It just makes them ambitious. And I would like them to see pictures of women in non-traditional roles for women, such as, I don't know, like what? Like construction, firefighting,
Firefighters.
right?
Yeah.
Police officer.
Yeah.
I would like to kind of mitigate some of these biases. Go ahead.
Yeah. And that's like when it was firefighting week at school, the firefighters came, you know, and I read this book, like My Mom is a Firefighter. There's a book.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
one of the boys in my class was like, well, moms can't be firefighters. And I went over this whole thing. I'm like, you can be whatever you want to be. All you need to do, whether you are a male or a female, it doesn't matter. You could be whatever you want to be. All you need to do is go to a special school to be that somebody. So if you are a mom or a female or a girl or whoever, and you want to be a firefighter, all you have to do is go to firefighting school, learn how to be a firefighter, and you could be a firefighter. If you want to be a nurse and you are a male or a boy or a dad and you want to be a nurse, you just have to go to school and learn how to do that. All it takes is going to school and learning. And then they finally kind of are like, oh, that's all it takes? I'm like, yeah. You know, because
They don't know.
They don't know.
And if
because
they're
all they've
raised-
ever seen is male firefighters.
And like, right, if they're raised in an area where all they see is male, or they somehow got a message from somebody, from something that they said or whatever, that this is a man's job, then we have to kind of combat that notion by showing them evidence of the other. And then there are kids who are raised with such little bias. And I find teachers sometimes cringe. I'm going to give you an example. And it isn't about this teacher specifically. I just want to tell you what a child said in response to a question. And that I can imagine some adults cringing at what this child said, unfortunately. So the class was asked what they know about families. A great exercise with young children when you're teaching young children, like during circle time, is to sit them down and ask what they know about a topic that you're going to talk about. Because if they already know it, you don't need to hammer away at it. You have to teach them things they don't know. So there was this one class where the teacher said, what do you know about families? And here was a quote from a child. She wrote down everything they said. Here was a quote. It says, if a boy and a boy marry each other, or a girl and a girl marry each other, that's okay. It's whoever you like. And that came from a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Which means this child has been exposed to lack of bias, having to do with the LGBT community. And that's something that we should applaud and support, in my opinion. Not everyone would agree with that. And that has to do with both my biases toward, like you can have biases toward something. I have biases toward complete and total acceptance, and other people don't.
Right.
You know, and I just think we need to kind of recognize this. Children, especially today, are going to walk into classrooms with, I think, this large variety of what they consider normal. Don't you think?
Yeah.
And I think it's expanding. Like the school that I just came from, the one that I just left a couple years ago, there were a lot of families that had two dads, two moms,
Mm-hmm.
mixed families. So like when we would teach about families, the children knew, like, yeah, it's okay to have two dads because, so and so over here has two dads. It's okay to have two moms and a dad because, this girl over here has two moms and a dad. Like, it was just like, and so it was more accepted at that school because they're like, yeah, that's what she has, so that's normal. And I think the more that these children are exposed to that, and they're going to be more exposed to it more than we were when we were kids,
For sure.
for sure, it's going to be more accepted, I think. Because, like, it's hard for, I think, people our age sometimes to accept it because we weren't exposed to that when we were kids at all. That was not,
So I guess
that
the
wasn't
question,
happening, but it is now.
it is now, and it's
Yeah.
fine. But I think the question is whatever it is, whether it's sexuality or it's race or it's religion or
Right.
ageism. Ageism
Yes.
is another thing.
It's another thing.
It's another thing. Like
Yeah.
I object to the notion that older people have no value in our society. Like
Oh,
especially
I
as
think
I
they
get
have a
older.
lot of value. Yeah.
Especially as I get older, I'm getting a little sensitive about that.
Yeah.
But I think all these things, the ageism, everything. I think the question for those of us who interact with young children is, what should our approach be? Because we all have bias.
Yeah, it's hard because, like, I know everybody has bias, but it's almost like you need to, even if you don't believe in same-sex marriage or whatever it is that we're talking about that day, you need to present it to the kids like it's okay and that's really hard.
Yeah.
It's almost like hide it from them, and that can be very hard for some people. I'm pretty open to like anything and everything. But like some people aren't, and so it's hard for them to be like, yeah, it's okay to have two dads.
But you know what? It isn't only that. Like I was talking to somebody recently who assumed that a child of a minority background was one of the children whose parents had to pay for childcare with a subsidy. That wasn't
Right.
true.
And that's not true.
That wasn't true.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is not the subsidy child in your class.
Right.
Like that child's not being subsidized. Why are you assuming that?
Right.
I think that we need to start to do with professionals a lot of self-reflection, and I think we need to be offering professional development courses more than we do about their biases. It's something I really
About the
want to get into.
biases. Yeah.
It's something I really
Yeah.
want to get into more, having taken this graduate coursework, because it's fantastic. To
Yeah.
even just sit and think about, what are your biases? Where do you fall in these categories? And I think that it's something that anyone who's listening to this podcast should start to look into.
Yeah.
There's this really great website. I think it's through Harvard. Oh, I wish I pulled it up before we started recording. But it's like you go on and they show you pictures and ask you questions. And real quick, you have to click on the picture that you think
Yeah.
applies. And it shows you
Yeah.
where your biases are.
Yes.
Do you know that
I've
website?
seen that. I don't know the website, but I've seen that before.
I'm
And
like
it's almost like
Googling as we talk.
no matter what, you feel like you fail.
Right?
Yeah.
About bias. Okay, wait.
Harvard
About two of us are Googling.
bias.
Here we go.
Harvard
I found
bias
it. I
test.
found it. It's
Yeah.
called it's called
Project Implicit.
implicit bias. Okay. implicit.harvard.edu/implicit. You could also Google Project Implicit.
Implicit. Yeah.
Implicit bias or biases.
If you just Google
implicit biases are, we should define it, are biases that kind of you don't know you have, and implicit meaning sort of hidden biases. And it's a fascinating thing to go on this website and to find out that you actually do have a lot of bias. So I encourage parents and professionals to please go to Project Implicit, run by Harvard, and take these online tests, and you will be shocked.
Shocked.
And
Yeah.
I really hope that helps you with your work with kids and you're raising kids. Please go on to that. Again, Google Project Implicit to figure out what your biases are so that we can do better with this next generation. It's just not okay, I think, to perpetuate the last generation's biases. It's
Right.
not all right.
And knowing is half the battle, I think. Like once you know what your what you have to be aware. You have to
You
be aware of
do.
what your
You do.
biases are. Sometimes you're not even aware of them.
It's even stuff like this, and we're coming up upon the 15-minute mark already, Allison.
Oh,
But
really? I
we
feel
are.
like we just started.
We are.
Okay.
But I, even stuff like this, like you think children shouldn't express their emotions is a bias.
Yes, that's a bias.
It's a bias. It has to do with how you were raised, and maybe what you experienced. And that's your bias. That doesn't mean it's true for everybody.
Not
I can't
true for
stand
everybody.
that. It's not true.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't stand when people are kind of like, this is, I like to, when I teach, and I teach a lot of professional development, child development things, I go from scholarly work. Just like I was able to Google Project Implicit, like I have all of these materials and all this scholarly work. And I think some people just go in with their own biases and teach more bias.
Yeah. Oh, they do. Oh, God. Yeah.
Like, we have to be careful of that.
Perpetuates itself.
It really does. But we are now, we have to end this episode, believe it or not. So we want to, Allison and I were talking offline, and we really want to encourage people to email us questions and things they'd like us to talk about, and you may find it in a future episode. You can send those emails. I'll share them with Allison because I have an email address, like a business one. It's Cindy, Cindy, at helpingkidsachieve.com. You can also reach me through my website, which is helpingkidsachieve.com, and email those questions. We also very much want to encourage you to please rate our podcast and comment on whatever you're listening to it on, whatever format you're listening to it on. If you give us anything less than a 5, we're going to cry, though. Just putting that out there.
Yeah. And if you like it, share. Always like and share.
Yeah,
like and share everything. Yeah.
Please do. And we hope that you will check out that website and check into your biases. And we'll hopefully hear from you via email or your comments.